Hello everybody and welcome back to another episode of RPG Radio. My name is Winback, and on today's episode we'll be tearing through the second half of the list of Nemesis bosses in Grimdawn with our Reaper, Vitality, and Cold-focused build. Right off the bat, we're jumping in, not wasting any time, with the ethereal Nemesis boss Valdaran, the Storm Scourge. Now, compared to the previous set of Nemesis bosses, Valdaran himself is not incredibly difficult, but I would rank him a bit higher in difficulty than some of the more trivial bosses from our last video. Valdaran specifically is going to be incredibly weak to cold damage, meaning that half our kit is going to be dealing insane amounts of damage to him. He does have a 12% resistance to vitality damage, however, which means that he's going to be right in the range of a lot of the other Nemesis bosses from the last one. So, that being said, our kit is going to be dealing almost full damage to him without much impediment from his resistances. He's got the 3.6 million in health that any other Nemesis boss does, but he does have a pretty wicked amount of burst damage if you're standing right on top of him. He is a lightning-focused enemy, and he can swap places with you, which is pretty frustrating if you haven't cleared out all of the trash around him. Now, Valdaran's main damage types are going to be fire, cold, lightning, and aether damage. He's a Nemesis boss, so obviously all of these things are kicked up to 11, and he can melt you if you're not moving around and trying to at least dodge a little bit of what he's doing. Unfortunately, he does deal enough damage that we don't have the ability to sit there and face tank him like we do with the Reaper of the Lost. One of the other themes for this video that you may end up noticing is that these Nemesis bosses do have quite a few more spawn locations than a couple of the ones in the previous video. Unfortunately, that is going to be a big factor in why or why not I decide to continue farming them, and Valdaran, we got pretty lucky because I managed to happen upon him in the necropolis very early, but he does have a total of 27 spawn locations. 5 of those are going to be in the gates of necropolis. The gruesome harvest has 4 and the warden cellar has 4, but he also has a lot of spawn locations all over the place in the key dungeon of Port Valbury. So that, in and of itself, you'll see me talk about a couple times in this video. Key dungeons and Nemesis bosses do not mix, and I will stand on this hill and die for it for however many of these videos that we do, for however many builds, unless your build is just keyed up to 20 million, able to kill the Nemesis bosses within a matter of seconds. There is no reason to go into a key dungeon to chase down a Nemesis. Just reload your game, find him outside the key dungeon, and make the experience so much easier. Unless you're looking for a challenge, I really don't think that there's any reason to go hunting down a key to fight a Nemesis in what is just conceivably their best opportunity to attack you. So, all of that being said, Valdaran himself has the swapping teleport ability, has a lot of damage in the lightning department, but as long as you're mobile, as long as you're using the kit to its best effect, he is a very simple to deal with boss, and you shouldn't have to worry about much. Very farmable, very findable for the most part, and like I said, just reload the game if he ends up inside of a key dungeon for you. Now, the next Nemesis boss on our video today is the Iron Maiden. The Iron Maiden is Kaiman's chosen Nemesis, and this boss does have a lot of very sneaky damage, but probably one of the better things about her is that she does have a very small number of spawn locations. So, she's either going to spawn in Fort Icon in one place, she's going to spawn in Fort Heron in one of 2 places, or she's going to spawn in the Tomb of Archon Bartholom in one of 5 places. Now, that being said, once you find her, the fight is a little bit more difficult than you might expect, but because she is so easy to find, she is very easy to farm. So once you're around her gimmicks, she is, I'd say, pretty up there on, at least as far as efficiency goes. She's very good for farming items, farming Nemesis troves, making sure that you're getting purples over and over again. It's very good. Now, as far as the fight itself goes, she's a little bit tougher. Ultimately, she is going to have just the same resistances to our damage as Valdaran does, with 5% to cold and 12% to vitality, so we can damage her quite a bit, but we do still have to clear out all of the trash that is around her. She's doing mostly physical and bleeding damage, and piercing damage on occasion as well. This boss is unfortunately one that just snuck right up on me and deleted me with 1 or 2 attacks that I was not prepared for. The Iron Maiden is essentially a soldier character. She's a very healthy soldier character, but she's going to be hitting you with Markovian's Advantage, Blade Arc, Cadence, she has Shockwave, she has Zul'Han's Technique, she's got Overguard, she has almost everything in the soldier kit that could make a soldier, peak soldier. On top of that, she is pretty tanky, even though we're doing a lot of the right types of damage to her, so kiting her around is still very important because she can whip out a whole lot of damage while we try to sit there and face tank her. In essence, the way that she's going to kill me is with a Blitz, followed up by a Shockwave, followed up by a Blade Arc. And her Blitz is actually a lot more impactful than a Soldier Blitz because it applies her Sunder. So when she blitzes you, she's going to attack you from very far away. She's going to apply her Sunder to you unless you dodge it, and you are going to be primed, depending on your stun resistance, to take any of her other abilities to the face. And it is all going to be very fast. You can see we took about 75% of our health bar after being sundered by her first go round, so her health is dropping. She also has access to Menhir's Will, so after she goes down a certain percentage of health, she can get a lot of that back. There's the stun from the Shockwave and a follow-up Blade Arc to tear us apart once again, but she's only got 50% of her health bar back, so with a little bit more mindful dodging of her Sunder, whether we dodge it on the incoming or run like a helpless baby while it's applied to us, she's very manageable. She is, after all, a melee character, so if you're dodging her big burst combo and her ability to sunder you, you do have a lot more opportunity to just lay into her, lifesteal her, hit her with all that cold damage that she so desperately hates, and we'll say fairly efficiently take her out. She does require a little bit of kiting, which is unfortunate. You can't just, again, you can't stand there and face tank her like the Reaper of the Lost with this build, but because she is weak to all of the damage that we do, and she is mostly dodgeable if you know what to look for and to avoid her Sunder, you will be able to get this Nemesis fight down pretty easily, and if you're looking for a very efficient boss to farm, this is all her. On the difficulty scale, we'll call the Iron Maiden average because she does have a lot of damage to take you out if you're not paying attention, and it is sometimes when you're farming anything over and over again, it can get pretty tedious and you can let your mind wander. That's when she's going to sneak up on you and delete your entire health bar. So make sure that you're used to the fight, make sure that your build is ready for it, and then you can farm her on repeat for all sorts of Nemesis goodies. As far as her counterpart goes, Xantarin the Immortal, we won't be doing that Nemesis boss with this build because we are a Necromancer. We don't fight against other Necromancers, and that'll be the same for any class that chooses to fight the Kaiman's Chosen or the Order of Death's Vigil. You'll always have the Nemesis available for the other one, but you won't have the Nemesis available for the faction that you've decided to shack up with. So, That being said, we'll run into Xantarin eventually with a different build, because I do have a couple of Kaiman's Chosen hanging out in the wings, but at least for the Reaper, who is half Necromancer, there will be no Xantarin the Immortal. Now, there are two more Nemesis bosses in this video, and the first of which is going to trigger my PTSD for hunting and finding absolutely nothing. Kaisan, the eldritch scion, is available in over 29 locations, and he is spread very thin across so many of those locations. Ultimately, yet again, we're not going to go hunting for him in a key dungeon, because by the time we get to the last Nemesis boss in this video, you'll know exactly why. But Kaisan specifically is an Act 7 Nemesis boss. He is going to come about because of the infamy from the Eldritch faction, and once you've farmed up enough of those big angry guys in Act 7, he will eventually rain down upon you with his big sword hands and his really awesome monster infrequent. The best part about Kaisan is that his amulet that drops is incredibly good, especially if you can get the right rolls on it for the build that you're after. It's really easy to just fall back on in a lot of builds. Now, because Kaisan is so hard to find, we're going to go ahead and just run through the list of all the places that he can appear. If you're not using Grim Tools, if you're not using the map in Grim Tools to hunt down the locations of your Nemesis bosses, I highly recommend it, because memorizing names of the maps and trying to listen to some guy on YouTube tell you where they are is not nearly as efficient as picking it up from a guaranteed map that knows where they all are. That being said, there are quite a few of them, so you can really pick and choose a couple different waypoints or rift gates in this game to start the journey. My personal preference is to start with the Ruins of Abid rift gate, because there are two locations on the left and right, or the east and west, however you want to talk about it, that he can spawn. You have about 6 different locations right there around one rift gate, which is pretty good considering he has 23 other ones that he can pop out of. Now, Ruins of Abid, when you go in there, run right really quick. The Nemesis locator on your minimap is it's pretty big. The range is pretty big, so you'll see that big angry skull up in your minimap if he is over to the east. But if he's not over there, you can quickly turn around and start heading west, because you'll need to go all the way through the Basalt Crags to see if any of those 4 locations are going to pop up on him. The good news is that the map is fairly well squished together, so you'll know pretty soon if he is there. It's not like you're going to have to run a marathon from point A to point B in one very long straight line. You should have the gift of the minimap to show you where exactly these boys are going to show up. So, that being said, if you can't find him in the Basalt Crags, then we're going to move on further north through the Infernal Wastes rift. Actually, once you hit that rift, it's probably easy enough just to teleport up to the Corvin City rift. Corvin City is it's going to be closer to his spawn locations in that area than your Infernal Wastes rift, and he's just right south. So you can walk down just a little bit from the Corvin City rift and have a pretty good indicator of whether or not Kaisan is going to be hanging around, having a good time, and letting you, eat his whole Nemesis box. After that, though, head north from Corvin City rift if you have not found him, because you'll need to check out the high side of the map. The remnants of Corvin City have 3 spawn locations for Kaisan, 1 towards the south of that section, and then 2 more towards the upper part, heading towards the Sunward Spire. The Nemesis can also spawn right in front of your grudge match with Korvac, the final boss of Act 7, but he's He's going to be right there in front of Travis, in front of the steward, in front of a whole bunch of big, angry enemies. You're going to have to clear out a lot of kind of strong trash to have a good fight with him in that location, so it's up to you if you want to chance it, but typically I'm not going to go over there to fight him. It's a little bit too much of a headache, and I kind of want the Nemesis fight to be quick. So, that being said, in this playthrough specifically, we were able to find him over in the remnants of the Corvin City. He does have a pretty decent amount of ranged damage. He is going to be able to sunder you pretty consistently unless you're dodging it, which ultimately isn't the hardest thing in the world to do. But the amount of trash that follows him around is potentially pretty tanky because of the living statues, the griffins, all the stuff that is just chasing you endlessly through this fight. In the Corvin City, you'll want to clear those out, but they do take some time to do that. So focus on those guys first before you sit there and let Kaisan wail on you while your lifesteal does its job. Kaisan, unlike the last couple Nemesis bosses, does have a pretty strong resistance to our cold damage at 50% and an almost unbelievably high 78% vitality resistance. So all of the damage types that we have against this Nemesis are going to be diluted. It's going to take a lot of time to whittle him down. His health bar is, again, 3.6 million big, and our damage is being adjusted through those resistances. His skills, specifically, you may have noticed that he drops a couple of eldritch crystals firing off neon green lightning, and he's calling down his very own neon green doombolt, which I'm super jealous of because it looks so awesome. Kaisan is going to be dealing physical, lightning, acid, and cold damage, and he does have a ramping auto attack that will reduce your health, as well as get him some vampiric health back. He is ultimately not a Nemesis boss that you want to stand there and fight, because he will shred you. The Doombolt that he drops is going to be dealing lightning and acid damage while slowing you down, and his Eldritch Shards, his pets, which are those neon green lightning blasters, are also going to live for quite a while. Now, his Sunder is ranged. It has a 100% chance to pass through anybody that it hits, and it's dealing physical lightning and acid damage, but more importantly, it is very easy to see coming. He does have a very big wind-up to it, and he makes it pretty easy to dodge on you. The projectiles themselves are pretty slow to travel, so if you are looking for it, all you have to do is hit your space bar, dodge whatever direction you want, as long as you're not dodging into the projectiles, and it's going to be pretty difficult to get hit with his Sunder. And as long as you're not hit with his Sunder, his other damage types aren't going to be shredding you to pieces like they normally would be with any other Nemesis boss. So it's fairly easy, I would say, to dodge what he's doing, but because his resistances are high and his Nemesis health is obviously huge, he does take a little bit to farm through. So maybe not the most efficient Nemesis to fight, but definitely another average on the difficulty scale, because while he can kill you if you're not paying attention, he likely won't. Meaning that there is only one Nemesis left for us to fight, and it is by far the absolute most difficult Nemesis for this build to deal with. That is taking into account the fact that Kubacabra was very challenging, and very tanky, and very damaging. Musalaki the Chillwind, the Arkovian undead Nemesis boss, is an actual living nightmare. The reason that Moose is such a big deal and such a pain, for starters, is because he has quite a few spawn locations, only 19 when you compare him to Kaisan with his 29, but of those 19 locations, Moose really loves to spawn in the Steps of Torment, the key dungeon for the Arkovian Undercity. This is the entire reason that I am so traumatized throughout this video and will tell you to never, ever go into a key dungeon to fight a Nemesis if you can avoid it. Because Moose likes to hang out in the Steps of Torment on levels 2, 3, whatever, he is your one chance. You get one shot to kill him, or the dungeon is going to lock up, and you'll have to reload the game, hunt him down all over again, and potentially waste another key. Specifically for this video, I had to reload the game 4 times after I checked every other location that he could be to get him out of the key dungeon. I don't know why, but the big angry ice golem just felt like he was nice and cozy down in the deep dark dungeon of the Doom, and I couldn't have him come fight me for anything. But after all that hunting, he is fairly easy to find as long as you don't get stuck fighting him in a key dungeon. His locations are all relatively close to a rift gate, so specifically if you are using this build, I'm going to tell you right now, spoilers, you don't want to fight Moose. It's not really worth it unless you really just have to have one of his monster infrequents. That being said, the locations to find him, as long as he's not in the Steps of Torment, are relatively easy to check, and because this build has a lot of mobility to it, you can kind of blast through all of them, checking all the locations with relative ease. So, Arkovian Coliseum is a little bit off the beaten path of the Twin Falls Rift. You just gotta head west to go give it a check. The Arkovian Undercity has 6 spawn locations for Moose, and that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. You take the Twin Falls Rift, you go down right where I am right now, and you'll check every level of the Arkovian Undercity for this big bad boy. Crumbling Watch is over next to your first Act 2 Rift Gate. It is a little place at the top right of the map, and it's fairly small, but it's full of undead. You'll see his Nemesis locator right away. Old Arkovia, same thing. Everything near that first Act 2 Rift Gate is going to be pretty close to where Moose can spawn, and you'll see him very early if he's there. So after all of those, you're only going to find him in Anguish, Misery, Pain, Suffering, and the Steps of Torment, which are all part of that key dungeon and should be avoided at all costs. You can see right now that Moose has in his retinue a bunch of other gargantuans, and one of the things that this build cannot do very well, which is, pretty few and far between, I feel like, but it does not deal very well with being frozen, being petrified, or being entrapped, so we'll say. Because skeletal gargantuans can hold you down and punch you to death with their repeated short cooldown roots, the entire fight with Moose is made infinitely worse because there is so much CC and they are tanky beyond belief. You have got to kill every single skeletal gargantuan, whether it is heroic or normal, because you can get trapped just like I am right now and punched into oblivion by Moose and his big damage. It is disgusting, and this is only phase 1. We just cleared out all of his crap, and he still rooted us to punch us with his Sunder Beam, so it's just going to get worse. You heard correctly, Musalaki the Chillwind has a phase 2. He is the only Nemesis boss apart from Kubacabra who does something after you kill him the first time, and the second time around is just so much worse. Before we even activate his phase 2, we have to talk about his resistances. He's got a little bit less health than your average Nemesis boss because of his phase 2, but his health bar is at 2 million. His resistances, however, are at 81% cold and 88% for vitality. So he's absolutely removing the biggest, broadest chunk of damage that we can do to him. And that is nightmarish for Phase 2. Phase 2 kicks off, and all of a sudden, Moose has decided that you get to taste the frozen side of his kit much more often than he was trying to do it in Phase 1. Moose summons pets who are going to fire off these little frozen ninja star projectiles constantly. Not only that, but the pets themselves, those ice clusters, are incredibly tanky because they share some of the resistances with Moose, meaning that everything that we can hit them with isn't enough to kill them outright in one swing. So you do have to stand there and punch them for a while they are freezing you. I thought maybe during this fight it was going to be a good idea to clear them out, but at the end of all things, all they're really good for is dodging and using your Shadow Strike or your other targeted movement abilities to get away from him. If he is going to hit you with the Sunder, all you got to do is pull out Shadow Strike on one of those ice clusters because you're running away from them so often. You have a very, very big gap for Moose to close, and he does not have any really quick catch-up like your blitzes or your teleports. He's just a big, lumbering gargantuan who will never stop hunting you down. Which is arguably worse, than all of the movement abilities on all of the enemies so far. The fact that he never has to stop coming at you and he can freeze you while being very far away is just ridiculous. Now, he does summon more skeletons. He summons more undead because he's a big gargantuan. He's made of bones. He can basically raise the undead all the time. He's a really cool boss when you're not, effectively completely countered by his entire kit. So, he'll summon Frost Revenants. They're not just regular skeletons, they're ice skeletons. He'll summon those ice clusters to freeze you yet again. He will summon archers to fire at you when he's just making his way downtown to you. And when it comes time to sunder you, he will be launching these very big tidal waves your way. You can't see him very well on the bridge because the effect doesn't go off the side of the bridge. But he did it to us a couple times there, and he is going to reduce a big chunk of your health. It looks like 15%. He's going to convert some of that damage to health. He's going to have a chance to freeze you. He's going to slow you and deal physical, piercing, and cold damage to you, meaning that a lot of the armor that we have stacked up gets bypassed, and he's just going to make me cry. So now that he's dead, we can dance on his corpse and we can have a good time and celebrate. I would not rate Musalwaki the Chillwind anything less than extremely hard, and honestly, avoid this boss at all costs with this build if you can. Especially if he's in a key dungeon, but even if he's just prancing around all regular like, he's incredibly annoying, and because we're effectively 100% hard countered, it's just not worth it. If you want his shoulders, I'd say go for it, but there's only so many reasons. That's it for me though, everybody. Thanks so much for hanging out. Peace out.